Filters inside of Substance Painters allow us to modify existing content. A grayscale image could be blurred. An image can be modified. An existing set of pixels can be adjusted using a whole series of filters. But what if we wanted to create a new image from existing data inside of the scene? That's where generators come into play. Generators create images. Filters modify existing images. And I used a generator to help me create the color map for the kind of the channels in here for my turtle shell itself. I wanted there to be some dark areas in between each one of the cells in the turtle shell to create the illusion that maybe there's been dirt and grime accumulation, that there's some sort of color value in here that's separating out all these little sections. My reference images showed me quite directly that this was a prominent feature of a turtle, and I wanted to make sure that that was represented in the final texture that I created. Now, I didn't want to go in and have to paint all of this by hand, so I used a generator. Since we created a whole series of mesh maps early on in this in the sequence, perhaps I can use some of the information from my high resolution sculpt to generate some masking information for me automatically. Now let's go ahead and do that. Let me show you the underpinning of this entire operation. I'm going to turn the final finished result off, and you can see how much that generated effect adds to the detail that we're creating. It almost kind of looks incomplete without it. Let's go through the process of making one real fast. It's pretty straightforward. Okay. Earlier in the sequence, one of the first things that we did when we started our new project was to bake some mesh maps. These mesh maps, as we saw before, you go into texture set settings, it's all of this stuff, the baked mesh maps, allowed us to extract a lot of texture information from our high resolution sculpt and put it inside of a whole series of texture maps. These are called our mesh maps. And we're going to access those mesh maps inside of the generation of this effect. If we go into your library, I'm going to go into my project. And specifically, these are the mesh maps that I want to look at. I want to look at the curvature, because the curvature map does a great job of defining the transitions between all of these cells on the shells. And I want to access that in the creation of my mask. Let's look at it real fast. It's pretty straightforward. We're going to start off this entire process with a fill layer. Right now, it's blanketing the entire mesh with this gray. Now I've made it red. We'll keep it a bright color just so we can see the effect of it. I don't want it to affect the height, the roughness, the metallic, or the normal. I just want it to work with color. I find this to be a really helpful beginning so that we can clearly understand the impact of the mask and the generated effect on the final texture itself. So we're going to be using these generators in conjunction with a mask. Let's create a mask real fast. Here's a black mask. And then with that mask selected, we'll go into the Effects pull-down menu and choose Add Generator. So this is going to create masking information for me. Much like our filters, we get it in the Layers palette, and we will load in and select the generator down in our Properties area. Now what we're looking for here is that we want to do Mask Editor. Okay, this Mask Editor, or even Mask Builder. Mask Builder is another really good one. These are going to allow us to use those existing mesh maps inside of our system. I want to do Mask Editor. This is the most recent version of this tool. Adobe has made some updates to it. They've included the Mask Builder Legacy as part of the tool set because a lot of folks still use it, but the Mask Editor generator is really quite good. Let's go ahead and apply the generator, and you can already start to see the effects of that generator. It's using all of the curvature information and the ambient occlusion information that was generated from the mesh map baking process in the mask itself. Now, the magic of this generator really comes down inside of the properties, because we can make some global adjustments and then some micro adjustments to individual channels. I want the global invert to be applied because right now we're doing a great job of defining the outsides, and that's cool. Maybe we'll use that later on inside of our sequence. But really the goal is to create a mask for the insides of all of these cell lines. So let's invert it. Yeah, there we go. And we're getting there. We're starting to get all the cracks and stuff, but we're also getting the outsides as well. More on that here in a minute. We'll solve that problem in a second. So we're getting a pretty good result. Let's go down into the bottoms here. And this is where it really becomes more important because we have ambient occlusion, curvature, and world space normal opacity. Now, we're most interested in the curvature. With the curvature opacity of 0, you can see the effect. Here it is 100, aha, and it's starting to get a whole lot better. It's starting to find pretty quickly the curvature of all of these cells. Thank you, high resolution sculpture. You're doing a great job of trying to find all of these edges for me real fast. Now, I'm liking this result. This is a good step. And the mask generator, the mask editor generator, excuse me, is made a very difficult job very, very easy. We still have some work in here that we need to do, but luckily, this generator can be influenced by a whole series of filters and other effects. This speaks very directly to the power of the substance painting system. So I'm liking this. This is really good. We can even, I would encourage you to explore this even more because we can even throw in some procedural textures in here. That's where we also have these image inputs, which allow us to continue to add some additional variation in here. Let's find a good procedural. Let's do this one, dirt scratchy. And it's going to be maybe difficult and small to see. So I've loaded in an image input. Inside the mask editor, let's enable the image input under this texture and see what we get. Yeah, it's really coming through over in here. We're not seeing it in the cracks so much, and that really is probably more to do with the size of the cracks, but it is working, which is pretty neat. And allows us to create some really wonderful organic results. I might come back to that in a little bit later, but I'm going to turn it off just for the time being because I'm going to focus my energy on these cracks. As I mentioned before, we can apply a whole series of other effects in addition to the generator. And my solution to getting just the lines is a relatively easy one. Let's go and add an effect, and I'm going to add a paint effect. And this is going to allow me to paint where I want the mask to go and not go. Let's make the size of my brush a little bit bigger, maybe a little too big. Now, I don't want to paint with white. I want to deactivate the red on the interior of the cells. So I'll change my grayscale value back to black. And now I can just paint out. Let's make it a little bit bigger. I can just very quickly paint out where I don't want the red to be. This is the power of masks and the power of substance. I just love this. It just makes it so easy to control and to create wonderful effects quickly. This would be historically something that'd be very difficult for me to go in and do. I would have to laboriously paint all these little cracks and what have you, and it would take forever, and I'd never get a really great result. This way I can very quickly go in and paint out the masks in the areas that I don't want them to. This would be a process of about 5 minutes of quickly painting, and then I'm done. I'm not going to do all of it because it's going to take some time. The last thing that I want to do is add another filter, and as one might imagine, I'm just going to blur it a little bit to make the transition here a little softer. Generally speaking, we want to try to avoid really crisp lines inside of our organic shapes. Nothing is ever that crisp. Really what I'm interested in is a very dark core on the inside, and then it slowly feathers out towards the outside. And that's what I did down over here. And you can see the results. It's pretty great. So these generators do a great job of creating some pixels for us based off of existing information inside the application itself. They're a wonderful addition to our tool set, and the mask editor generator is really going to help us take advantage of all of that high resolution information that we created and sculpted over in Blender. So use these generators. They're a fantastic helper in creating some wonderful texturing information right here in Substance Painter.